All right, let's dive into a question that seems simple on the surface, but is actually incredibly complex. Why can't everyone get fast, reliable internet? To get to the bottom of this, we're going to zoom in on one fascinating case study, Scotland.
You know the feeling, right? You're in a city, everything is flawless, but the second you're out in the countryside, you're staring at that dreaded buffering wheel. That gap, that's the digital divide. And believe me, it is not an accident. It's the result of a really powerful economic principle we're about to unpack.
So, what's really going on here? Well, it all comes down to a key economic idea called market failure. Just think about it from an internet provider's perspective. It costs a fortune to lay miles and miles of fiber optic cable out to a remote village with maybe only a few dozen homes. There just aren't enough customers to make a profit. So, even though people desperately want the service, it just doesn't make business sense. The free market on its own fails to deliver. Okay, so here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we'll dig into what the digital divide really is. Then we'll look at the government's grand plan to try and fix it. We'll follow the money through a whole decade of progress, but also confront the tough reality that it's still very much an unfinished job. And finally, we'll uncover the ultimate prize, the innovation payoff that makes this whole struggle worthwhile.
All right, first step, the digital divide. You might think this is just about some people having internet and others not, but it's way more complicated than that.
And honestly, the best way to think about this is with a simple analogy. Think of broadband like the water supply to your house. Just having a pipe connected is the first step. That's what we call connectivity. But if that pipe is super narrow, all you're going to get is a tiny trickle of water. What you really need is enough flow, or bandwidth, to handle everything you want to do at once. So this actually leads us to two different kinds of digital divides. The first one is the one we all picture, just a total lack of a physical connection in those rural spots. But the second divide is way more subtle. You might technically have a connection, but if it's painfully slow, costs a fortune, or you just don't have the skills to use it, you're still being left behind. Just building the pipe is only half the battle. So when the market fails, who steps in? Well, that's where the government comes in. Which brings us right to Section 2, the government's grand plan. This is where a long, expensive, and super complex policy journey gets started. Okay, let's rewind a bit to set the scene. Way back in 2005, Scotland had actually hit a pretty big milestone. 99% of the country had access to basic broadband. But basic back then meant 512 kilobits per second. To put that in perspective, today's superfast standard is literally 60 times faster than that. It just goes to show you how insanely fast the goalposts move in the digital world. And that rapid change leads us straight into Section 3, a decade of progress. We're going to follow the money here and look at the huge 15-year push to try and catch up. You can really see the strategy evolve here in waves. The first few years, all about setting goals, kind of laying the groundwork. Then, in that middle period, that's when the serious money starts getting thrown around. But from 2017 onwards, wow, the ambition just explodes. The goal wasn't just a connection anymore. It was a super fast connection for absolutely everyone. And just look at the sheer scale of this commitment. The numbers are huge. Notice how that investment just jumps over time. We go from a £410 million program in 2013, trying to get to 95% of people, to a massive £600 million program just a few years later with the goal of hitting 100% with super fast speeds. Just to really let that sink in, £442 million. That was the price tag for just one of these programs. That's the staggering amount of money we're talking about when you try to fix market failure. So you gotta ask, why spend all this cash? What's the point? Well, this quote from the government's own strategy really gets to the heart of it. This isn't just about faster Netflix. This is about economic justice. It's about making sure that your chance to start a business or get an education or access critical services isn't decided by your postcode. But here's the thing. Even with all that money and all that motivation, it still wasn't a simple fix. And that brings us to Section 4, an unfinished job. This is where we see the progress run smack into some big problems and a whole lot of politics. This chart, wow, it just lays the problem out so clearly. Just look at that gap. While cities are sitting pretty at nearly 100% superfast coverage, rural areas are lagging way behind at just 67%. That 30-point difference, that is the digital divide. And closing that gap means connecting the absolute hardest to reach, most expensive places. And then, of course, you have the politics.
In the very same year, you've got a UK government minister saying Scotland is falling behind, while a Scottish government secretary is claiming it's leading the pack. When that happens, how is the public supposed to know what's really going on? It gets confusing fast. So what happens when the official programs just don't get the job done? Well, this is where the story gets really inspiring. People literally take matters into their own hands. In these two villages, Altnahara and Skure, the residents actually grabbed shovels and dug the trenches for the fiber optic cable themselves. It's incredible. It shows you that sometimes that last mile has to be built by the community itself. Okay, so this massive effort, all this money, all this community spirit, what's it all for? This brings us to the real payoff. In our final section, we're going to see why this was never just about streaming movies. It's about something much, much bigger: innovation. The ultimate prize, the real endgame, is creating an ecosystem for what's called open innovation. Just think of universal broadband as being like incredibly fertile soil. Once you have it everywhere, businesses, governments, and individuals can all connect and collaborate in ways that were impossible before. A local artist in a tiny village can sell their work globally. A local council can offer better digital services. New ideas can just flourish. So this is basically the roadmap, right? The government's whole theory is laid out in these 4 steps. Step 1, public money fixes that market failure we talked about. Step 2, that creates a level playing field so rural businesses aren't at a disadvantage. Step 3, those businesses can now compete in the digital world. And the final step, a thriving local economy, all driven by this new ecosystem of open innovation. Okay, so let's boil this all down. What are the big takeaways from our journey here? First, market failure is the fundamental reason governments have to get involved. Second, fixing it is an absolute marathon, not a sprint. It's expensive, it takes forever, and it's always politically messy. Third, that community power we saw, it's often the secret ingredient to getting the job done. And finally, remember, the real prize isn't just about faster streaming, it's about unlocking innovation and economic growth. And all of this leaves us with one last, really big question to chew on. As pretty much our entire lives, our work, our healthcare, our society moves online, is high-speed internet just another service you can buy? Or is it a basic utility, just like water and electricity? Or has it become something even more fundamental, a basic human right for the 21st century?